And welcome to Thrift Shop Biography. This is the one about Vivienne Westwood. Thank you for listening. Hi.
Hello.
So, this week we've been reading the autobiography of Vivienne Westwood. And I should put it, it's an autobiography in conjunction with a writer, right?
Yeah.
Writer, right?
Yes.
I really enjoyed the format of it.
Yeah.
And that the writer fills in, kind of narrates in a way.
Historical context and stuff.
Incredible,
Because she
so
obviously
useful.
would not have had time to do all that research of her own life.
And then the bits that she speaks are actually verbatim. It's like...
Yeah, it's almost like a magazine article or an interview. Yeah, it's like an interview.
So she talks at length, obviously.
Yeah.
So you get the historical context and the political climate and stuff from him, and then all of a sudden her voice comes into it.
Yeah, she breaks through and actually chats to you.
What I really loved is that he also talks to her sons.
Yeah.
And so they have bits in it as well. So it's such a well-rounded, and I think probably better than just having an autobiography where it's just one person.
Yeah.
Anyway, Vivienne Westwood, before you read this book, what did you think of her?
Well, she's a fashion icon, obviously, and I knew she founded punk, and I haven't missed her career. I've seen it happen. A lot of tartan, safety pins. That's the sort of thing I think of. And she died recently at quite a good age, and she aged gracefully, and she's, nothing but respect. She's excellent. That's all I knew. I didn't know she was a teacher. Lots of things I didn't know.
Lots of things you
Lots
didn't
of
know.
stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
How about you?
I've always loved her. Full disclosure, I've read this book before when it came out.
Yeah.
So when you found it in the thrift shop, you said, I found Vivienne. I was like,
really
brilliant!
happy. Yeah.
I get to read it again.
Yeah.
I've always loved her, but I've loved the woman, the person. Like, I almost have no interest in fashion. So it's weird that I should love her so much.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in her as an icon, but also as a personality, as a political person, as an artist, actually. Yeah. Also, I was very into punk and stuff.
Yeah, that
later. I was too young to like it the first time round. And she was so much a part of that obviously turned me on to her. But in terms, I don't follow her fashion career, but I follow her. Like if she's in an interview in a magazine or if she's on TV, I will listen and I will read everything about her. But
I'm the other way around. I've never really bothered listening to her speak. I should look at the pictures. Yeah, and weirdly enough, my friend gave me a Vivienne Westwood jacket during lockdown.
Really?
Sent it me in the post.
No kidding.
And it's tweed, and it's double layered lapel. And I thought, this is not anything I would ever wear myself.
Yeah.
Worn it, loved it. I love it because of the way it fits around me. And so it's really lucky that I've actually had the chance to experience wearing something from her, because I really get now how it fits your form. And the way it layers, it's just so cool. It's so different. But it's a tweed jacket.
Yeah.
It isn't. And everyone notices, everyone goes, that's cool. Yeah.
That's one thing she talks about, isn't it? About it fitting particularly women properly. And whereas I think a lot of the male designers are more about how something looks and it can contort the actual shape of a woman. Yeah. Whereas like Vivienne Westwood is like, no, you don't squash the breasts in, you fit it properly to a woman's body. Yeah. So it's interesting that you say that from just wearing one of her jackets. Yeah. Yeah. So let's immediately go straight back to the beginning, because she's had a real interesting rise. It wasn't just like somebody... I mean, she did always know that she was good at making stuff, right? Even as a young girl. Yeah,
plus she always had this sense that she was special in some strange way. She says, I've never talked about this before. I feel like it's arrogant to say so, but she just felt like she was important.
Yeah, different.
And she wanted to fight things, and
she also had like a natural talent for creating, making, to the point where she was quite bored at school of academic work. She wanted to be using her hands.
Well, it's important to say she was born in the middle of the World War II, so 1941.
Do you know what? I find that amazing, actually, when she talks like about her teenage years being at the time of rock and roll. You think, but it can't be. She's not that old.
She actually was that old.
Yeah, she was that old.
But she was young to the end.
Yeah.
Which is why it's cool.
Yeah.
So 1941, if you're born in the middle of World War II, then you're growing up in post-war Britain.
Yeah.
Which is make, do and mend.
Yes.
You know. So her mum made a lot of clothes, and it's about, they didn't have everything. She says she wasn't really aware of the things they didn't have because her mum managed to get everything. So there was no elastic in post-war Britain, but they always had enough elastic somehow. She had this sort of really amazing childhood that was just brilliant. She was in the countryside, picking flowers, skipping across fields.
Yeah. Where is she? In the north of England, right? In a little place called Tintwistle.
Derbyshire, yeah. I had to look it up. It's kind of right of Manchester into the countryside, that sort of way.
And it's her and a younger sister and a younger brother. And her mum and dad, who sound great and really supportive, like throughout her whole life. Even when she was doing stuff that they were opposed to, they still supported her 100%. Actually, being somebody radical, being a punk, you would expect there to be some kind of conflict with the parents.
Or rebellion or something.
Yeah, there isn't.
She just had confidence. She had a really good grounding.
Yeah.
So that can work for you as well, turns out.
Yeah. But you're right, that kind of post-war experience in her formative years, the ethics and stuff that she picked up.
Being creative with what you've got.
Yeah, it's really carried through, even to when she's, you know, a world-renowned designer. It's just that thing of having quality and making something good with what you've got. Yeah. Instead of this disposable culture that is everywhere these days.
I think the Queen's coronation happened when she was 12, and I think that deeply affected her, because she was saying that everything was very bland and dull, and then suddenly there was all this colour, and the whole streets were filled with flags, and everyone was out having parties. It was the first big colourful thing that happened since the war. And it must have struck a deep chord because she's so connected with royalty, isn't she?
She
in Britain.
is, yeah. Which I kind of think is at odds with her punk
when you're
sensibilities.
Yeah, exactly.
But somehow with her, it kind of just makes sense.
Yeah.
But she does have this fascination with royalty, and she ends up being friends with Prince Charles because they have their similar ecological concerns. But even with the Queen, when she talks about it, she's a designer, she wants to dress royalty.
Yeah.
And she's hoping that somebody in the royal family will wear her clothes. But it's completely at odds with half of her personality.
Yeah. I was reading this on the train, and it said, and then my parents decided to move to Harrow, and the train said, the next station is Harrow on the Hill. I was like, what? So I googled the address that they moved to, and it was like one street away from the exact place I was sat as the train went through. Yeah.
Wow.
I thought one day I'm going to get off and have a little wander.
Yeah.
Because I did Google Street Maps it, and it is still a shop. And so they lived over it.
Okay, so her mum and dad moved the family from Tintwistle up north down to London. They opened a post office stroke grocery store, and they lived above it.
Yeah, so Harrow is now pretty much considered
Part of London, yeah.
But it's just far out if you're on a bus.
But 40 years ago,
1958, it actually really was outside London.
Yeah.
So her social life didn't really take off because she was very much based in a suburb.
It was interesting as well how she noticed quite quickly a difference between north and south in terms of socialising.
And fashion and music. And
how she would go out on her own. And she got quite down about being in London because she would go out to places and she couldn't connect with people. And so she started getting the train back up north at the weekends. Because she said you go to a dance up north, near where she was, and you could dance on your own and somebody would dance with you, but you come down to London, suddenly the room is dark and people are all cliquey, and if you go on your own, you stay on your own. And
the actual style of her dancing was different, so she looked really odd.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see those dances and compare them.
Yeah.
So she came, when she was at Harrow on the Hill, she went to art school, right?
Yeah.
But she didn't stay there. I think she started off in art.
She did jewellery and silversmithing.
Then she left the art course to make jewellery.
Which is interesting because accessories is a big part of her label later on, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's good grounding.
For sure.
Little did she know.
But after doing her course, she actually then trained to be a teacher, and but specialising in art.
I don't even think it was. I think she was just a primary school teacher. Yeah, infants.
And she became a teacher. I mean, that's amazing.
And it's really good, the accounts that they say She was the best teacher ever because she was so creative, and she'd get them all on buses and take them out into the countryside.
Yeah, of course, because you're not
to museums.
You're not restricted by the national curriculum in the 1950s, 1960s,
yes.
and so you just did what you wanted to with them. She also, but mind you, she also took a bunch of 8-year-olds to the cinema to watch Battleship Potemkin, which is slightly.
But they'd have been inspired.
Yeah.
And it does say that people who got taught by her were completely inspired in life.
Yeah,
she's the most interesting teacher they've ever had.
Yeah, but also she kind of had she was almost anti-establishment whilst being a primary school teacher, in that she didn't impose rules on the kids really, and she favoured the naughty ones because she liked their energy.
Yeah.
I can imagine a young Vivienne Westwood in charge of a class of primary school children. Yeah. I bet they had a great time. Yeah. Endlessly creative, no rules. But so she did that kind of on and off, didn't she, being a teacher?
And plus she was the most stylish teacher ever invented and really stood out.
She's always been incredibly stylish. There's photographs of her in the book at the age of like 15.
She looks so much older, doesn't she?
She does look so much older, but she's also looks incredibly cool and stylish. Yeah. So even from that young teenager, she really had a sense of style, and it was important to her.
Very important. And it talks about, actually not she, but in the book, as it's giving the historical context, it's saying about all the different looks that are coming up, and T-shirts and jeans were getting made popular by people like James Dean and Elvis.
Ah, yeah.
Which is nuts, really, because we haven't really moved on from that.
No, it's true.
that's the 50s.
It's a good classic look.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not very interesting. She made it interesting, actually, because she took the T-shirt and ran with it.
Yeah, didn't she?
But it's saying that it's a fashion as a challenge to society, because I guess wearing jeans and a T-shirt is not wearing a suit and waistcoat and tie, which is what you've come from at that point.
100%. Back then, people were so smart.
Yeah.
Even things that people don't even dress up to go to the theatre anymore, but there was a time where, like, even if you went to get on a plane, you'd put a suit on.
True.
But I guess jeans and T-shirts and stuff kind of did.
That was a big statement at the time.
Yeah, and you can imagine actually the older generation probably really looked down on people who were wearing jeans and T-shirts. You're right, everybody wears it now.
Oh, I think it was very American as well, wasn't it? The jeans. Yeah. So it was like you were getting a bit of James Dean and Elvis if you wore the jeans.
Yeah,
from
for
America.
sure. Yeah.
Okay, so then she gets to 19, so only 2 years in Harrow. And she starts hanging out with a group that includes Derek Westwood. Yeah. And it's music that brought them together then, isn't it?
Yeah. Vivienne's younger brother says they were both, Derek and Vivienne, were both just so stylish and so cool. What I liked in the book is he said, I was immediately hero worship Derek, but I'd always hero worship Vivienne anyway. And it's like, that's a little brother. That's so sweet. But he said the two of them together were just so effortlessly cool and stylish, and they're like 19 at this point. And Derek's the same age, a couple of years older maybe.
And he's just an apprentice, I can't remember where, but he dreams of being a pilot,
an airline pilot,
and he ends up being one eventually.
And the thing I like about this as well is that Vivienne Westwood, I mean, they weren't together too long, she still says the nicest things about him now. She knows he's a really good man, and she loves him. He's a great dad.
Father,
because of course they have a baby quite quickly.
They get married and have a kid. She's sort of saying she doesn't know why she did it. It's just that it's what you did. If you went out with somebody, you've got to get married. You've kind of got to. The sex outside marriage thing, this isn't really a thing in 1950. Where are we? 1960 now.
Yeah. No, I can't get. I even remember in my lifetime, like in the 1970s, people didn't really get divorced and stuff. Even then, I mean, everybody gets divorced now.
And people definitely didn't live together. Without being married.
So to go back another 15 years, and I totally get where she's coming from. You know, you have a boyfriend, you're 19, you get married, and you have a baby. It's what you do.
And she's a teacher and it's responsible.
But
then at the same time, they're still being cool enough to be putting on dances. In London. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? That early on, she's hanging out with the Rolling Stones, the Who.
Yeah, because Derek is a club promoter and he puts on nights and he's managing bands, one of which is an early incarnation of the Who. And I didn't think they were called something else. And it's while Derek was managing them that they actually became the Who. So she's part of that scene already.
She's a bit of a rock star herself.
Yeah, she is. You know, obviously, like attracts like and all that. But it's at this point, one of her female friends, right? Is it Sarah or Sally? I can't remember.
Begins with an S.
It begins with an S. I think it's Sarah. Anyway, she's finding herself drawn to Sarah more. And even though she liked Derek, I think that she wasn't bored by him, but Sarah was...
Intellectual stimulation.
Yeah, and she also says to this day, even though Vivienne Westwood has worked with 1,000 models, she still says that Sarah is the most beautiful woman she's ever seen. But she was more worldly, and she was interested in other things, and like Vivienne was finding herself drawn towards, so that she had more of a connection with Sarah and wanting to be with her more and wanting to spend time with her. And then she kind of realised that perhaps Derek wasn't the person for her. Rather unusual, as we were just saying, the thing to do back then was to get married and have a baby. The thing not to do was leave your husband when the baby is still a baby.
Well, it's like 2. And she does it.
She does it.
Yep.
To the dismay of everyone that can't believe she's doing it, because nobody ever did
and
that.
It doesn't make any sense. It's not like he's evil or anything. She just knows it's not right.
It's just not right.
And then she moves in with her little brother's mates.
Yes.
It's a boy's house. And she moves in their house, like a shared house, with a baby. Well, a toddler.
Yeah.
That is insane.
Yeah.
Well, it's different. It really is.
But I guess that just goes to show the personality that she actually is, you know.
Unstoppable.
Yeah, and she's going to do what she wants to do. She doesn't care what people think.
No.
Although she did momentarily, in the fact that she did settle down with Derek and had a baby. That's kind of what convention dictates,
right? I guess so. But she still picked the coolest bloke, and they were still working and putting on dances, so it's still pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I mean, having a kid seems really conventional, but it's also amazing because she loves her kids and she's so free with them.
Oh, so...
Yeah, we will get to that later, but she is a very liberal mother.
She's a hands-off mother.
Yes, yes. But it's done well. They've come out well.
They adore her.
Yeah.
Even just reading what they say now as grown men, it's just kind of, I don't think I've ever heard any sons. It's interesting what they said. They said that they didn't just love their mum, they liked her.
Yeah, I know, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll get to that because she's only got one at the moment.
Okay, she's got a little baby.
And she's in a boys' shared house.
With her brother, who's an art student, right? Has her brother an art student? Her little brother's an art student. Then he brings a friend home one day called...
Malcolm McLaren.
Malcolm Edwards back then, right? He wasn't McLaren yet.
Oh, yeah. None of this is even his real names because his history is insane.
Yeah. He has a very disjointed family. Yeah. He has this overbearing grandmother. Yeah. His own mother doesn't seem to... It does say she's a prostitute, but it says it in speech marks, so I don't know whether... I think what they meant is she found a rich man in Monte Carlo and just went off with him and left Malcolm to it.
Yeah,
He also had a brother who is almost not mentioned, to the point that his granddaughter didn't know she had an uncle until she went to his funeral.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very strange...
Yeah, disjointed family, and I don't think they particularly looked after Malcolm, and I don't think there was a lot of love there for him, which explains a lot
that's
about
who he
him.
turned into. He didn't want kids, and that's absolutely fair enough. He always said he didn't want kids. He wasn't interested. Anyway, they got on intellectually like a house on fire.
And let's not forget that Vivienne is about 5 years older than him.
She is.
Which at those ages is actually a massive gap, I think.
He was 19.
Right.
When they met, and she was 24 with a toddler.
And a school teacher, which again makes her seem older.
She was very much the older woman in his mind at 19. And I don't think he'd even had a girlfriend.
Oh no, she took his virginity.
Yeah, that's right.
She took it.
She took it. Run with it.
So eventually, I mean, they were hanging out and they were interested in each other, but I kind of didn't get... Well, certainly on Vivienne's part, there was no sexual attraction.
Really wasn't. And I think there was only a mild interest on his part initially.
Yeah, they ended up having sex, not through any kind of like unbridled attraction. No. It's just that he was ill.
He said he might have even pretended to have the flu.
He says that he was pretending. I think he did that to kind of devalue it a bit.
Yeah, do you think? So he moved into her bed and wanted
She was looking after him when he was ill. So he was staying in her bed for a few days, and then that eventually ended up with her kind of getting into the bed and then having sex, and then she became...
So it isn't the greatest love story.
No, it really isn't. No, it really isn't. And it turns out not to be as well. But oddly, they do obviously forge an important...
It was the making of both of
history.
them. Yeah.
So they end up in bed together, which results quite quickly in her being pregnant again.
Daft.
Which he really had no interest in being a father.
Didn't, honestly.
And that's apparent throughout his whole life.
1965, but come on.
Yeah, and because he's still a young kid, I suppose, and he...
Yeah, I know, it makes absolute sense. He's a young kid, he's got everything to live for. He's obviously a really amazing spark of a human being. He's got his head full of ideas, and he wants to achieve this and do that and experiment with this. He doesn't bloody want to get saddled with a older woman, a toddler, and a baby on the way that says... It makes complete sense that he doesn't want a part of that. Both of those grown adults should have known better. Come on.
Well, they did, because Malcolm's grandmother gave them the money to go and terminate the pregnancy. And they're on the way to Harley Street. Yeah. And in that moment, Vivienne kind of realises, actually, I do like Malcolm a lot. Yeah. And I find him exciting and interesting, and he's got all these ideas. Yeah. Actually, I don't want to get rid of his baby. Yeah. And they took the money for the abortion, and instead of going to Harley Street, they went to South Moulton Street. Yeah. She bought a cashmere sweater and some matching fabric to make a skirt. Yeah.
That's the beginning of a lot of stuff. And amazingly, if you don't mind me leaping forward, that kid... Mm-hmm. Who's called Joe Corey, because that's one of the vague
it's a grandmother's surname, it's Corey.
Ends up being the creating agent provocateur, the underwear brand, which is my jaw dropped open when I read that. Had no idea that had any connection to Vivienne Westwood whatsoever.
So she's pregnant now. So she's got, and she's working as a school teacher. Yeah. And she said that Malcolm, she was fascinated by him. So they would sit up all night talking, but he would talk about himself all night. Yeah. And she couldn't shut him up, which meant that she was getting up and going to work at school absolutely knackered. Yeah. But at this point, they had made that decision that actually, they're going to have a child together, and Vivienne was going to make this work in spite of Malcolm not ready.
He said, all right, we'll have this child as long as you get it, that I won't have anything to do with it and I won't lift a finger to help you. And it's fair enough, because he didn't want it. On the other hand, it does take two to make it.
When she went to hospital to have the baby, he didn't go.
No.
For like the first 6 days, because when you had a baby back then, they keep you in hospital for a week. She said she was on a ward with all the other women who'd had their babies. Their husbands would turn up, and she didn't even care. She said, that's okay because my partner's different. And then when he did turn up 6 days later, the nurse said to him, you better be a long distance lorry driver. You better have a good reason for not being here.
God.
And she said that when he turned up, he had a bit of snow on him. He looked like an angel. It's just like, God.
I know, she really forgives him for a lot. On the other hand, they've made that deal. On the other hand, it takes two. I don't know. But anyway, that's how it was.
That is how it was. But do you know what? There is that thing where, he said it right from the beginning.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
He didn't want a baby, and he's not going to be a father.
But then use some contraception. It's not 1925.
But he's, in many respects, he is a child himself, and he wouldn't take the responsibility of contraception. Because it would always be somebody else's problem.
Honestly,
and actually,
it's stupid.
It was always
that situation.
It was always somebody else's problem, because that child, which was his, was Vivienne's responsibility in his head, to the point where he bought a cactus. Yeah. And he told the young child that the cactus was its dad, and he was not to call Malcolm dad. No, the cactus was his dad.
And he never did. And he wasn't really ever a dad to that kid, and that's fine, because Vivienne was an amazing, although a strange, an unconventional mother, and those kids turned out amazingly.
Yeah, they did. They really did.
And Malcolm increasingly was a bit of an arsehole. Actually, it wasn't. You can understand it at 19.
I would say he's a bit of an arsehole.
But the older he gets, the more it really cements into. No, actually, that's really bad behaviour at this point now.
Yeah, he gets worse.
He gets way worse, because you can't excuse it when he's grown up.
No, you can't.
And but they had the best mother and a really good life. So it actually worked out all right, as it happens.
Yes. And I also think that Vivienne, in the retelling of her relationship with Malcolm, she's very pragmatic about it. She doesn't really blame him for anything. I mean, she almost doesn't blame herself. She's just like, that's what happened. And that's what... She justifies it by saying that she felt that Malcolm needed her. Yeah. And so she, stayed in the relationship because he needed
He was really needy.
Yeah, my God, he was needy. Yeah. It's so weird. He just literally needed everyone's approval all the time. Yeah. And he couldn't do anything for anyone else. And if anything that other people were doing, he was trying to take credit for all the whole time.
Oh my God, he really did that.
So they weren't always present as parents, because they would go away and they would leave the young children with her parents, right? So they'd be spending the summers.
That's true, actually. They did loads of that.
Yeah. And then, but what happened when the kids were quite young still, when the kids came back...
Oh, they didn't remember her.
One of them went like catatonic. He couldn't remember his mum. And it freaked her out so much. She said it took a whole day, and then eventually Malcolm made him smile, and she was so relieved. The next day, she went into school. She says, I'm immediately resigning. She said, I'm spending the time with my children.
Yeah. And then moved to a caravan in Prestatyn.
Because they had no money.
Parents' caravan.
Malcolm wasn't working.
No money, and she gave him a really good life, didn't she?
Oh, it sounds amazing in that little caravan.
And there's just fabric everywhere. And
and they'd go out foraging and living off the land. They did. But she didn't know what she was. All of a sudden, she was back up in Prestatyn with her 2 young children in a caravan with no money. I mean, really, what was going to happen?
By the way, Prestatyn is a seaside town in Wales.
Wales.
Yes. I went past it on the train.
Did you?
2 days ago.
As you were reading about it in the book?
No. But now you just go past it on the train and all you see is sort of trailers,
right,
hundreds of them right along the coast.
And did you think at one point one of those had Vivienne Westwood in it?
No, because I picture it more as a caravan.
Yeah,
and that was the 60s. That will have rotted and died, that caravan. But now it's all these really smart mobile home sort of things all along the coast. It's nice though. I mean, it's gorgeous up there, so it would have been lovely for them.
But then, obviously, she couldn't work up there. I think because she was a teacher, they let her homeschool her children.
Yeah, that's right.
So they didn't always have to enrol into schools.
Yeah.
But eventually, I don't know how long she was there for, but Malcolm did say to her, come back, I've got us a flat.
He's going to pull himself together, which he never did. He just wanted her back.
Yeah, because he needed her.
Yeah.
So she went to be back with him.
And they got this place, 10 Thurley Court in Clapham, which is sort of got this iconic status because it's still there, corner house. I sort of picture it, big windows, and
it still belonged to her, right?
Yeah, that's still her house, and that was where, gosh, like right into the 90s, the whole fashion collections were just being made in that house
by
which
her,
is nuts.
with a sewing
It's
machine.
not that big.
Yeah,
it's just an ordinary house.
Yeah, well, it's a flat, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is why it's so amazing that all this happened in this tiny flat.
It's crazy. A whole famous collection that's probably bought up for the V&A was made in this flat.
By one woman on her sewing machine.
Yeah, well, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, 10 Thurley Court.
So they went there, and that's where they stayed for a long time.
Yeah.
Well, certainly, as they were Vivienne and Malcolm.
Together, to the end of them being that.
Yeah.
And then, around this time, they got a room at the back of the shop.
Oh, so this is
World's
the
End.
famous shop at 430
Where is
Kings
that?
Road.
Kings Road. Oh, yes, Kings Road.
Yeah.
Which is legendary for clothes, fashion.
It is. I would say that it kind of was before they got there, but I would say they absolutely put
it on
that
the map.
shop and that street on the map.
Yeah.
I think Mary Quant and stuff were there.
It was
before,
already there.
So it's a bit of a destination.
Oh, there's that other shop down the road that their mate owned that's got really Granny takes a trip. That was quite legendary.
So it was kind of a cool area.
It was a cool
with
street.
Cool shops. So there was a guy there who had a shop who quite often disappeared, and he had a space in the back.
Yeah.
Which is where Vivienne and Malcolm took over a space at there. And they were selling records though to begin with, right?
Records and clothes, because she was still doing that bricolage, it's called, sort of collaging stuff, taking t-shirts, sewing bits on, and
that only evolved because initially there was a rock and roll concert convention or something where all the Teddy Boys would come down, and Vivienne made some t-shirts of the rock and roll bands and stuff, but they didn't sell.
Oh, right.
And they were like, damn, we've invested what little money we have into these t-shirts. And then because they didn't sell, they then took these t-shirts and started cutting them up and sticking stuff on. Yes. And then that was kind of the beginning of, the fashion empire,
things
really.
I know, it's amazing that the slogan t-shirt, but it definitely started a whole decades of people going out with their personalities on their t-shirts.
That wasn't just like evolving from the rock and roll t-shirts, because they were very political and they were getting into the certain movements with their slogans and stuff, and they ended up putting the slogans onto the t-shirts.
That's true. That like
and the
Nazi things or gay slogans or Jesus mixed with a cock or all of it mixed up.
Oh my god, that is so funny. You know how I said that this book sometimes the sons, they interview the sons. Yeah. Anyway, this is Ben, this is when she's making those T-shirts. Yeah. Ben, Vivienne's small son, saw her make them. And he says, I'd be doing my homework in the corner while she was making things. And when she did the piss Marilyn Monroe T-shirt, I said, Mum, I'm confused. Do you like her or not? And she said, yeah, it's not about that. I'm just trying to shock people by putting piss on. And then when she was penciling in the cock of Jesus on the inverted cross on the swastika, I do remember thinking, my mum's quite eccentric. In those early days, those T-shirts, it was all about shock and getting publicity. Yeah. Like they would put a T-shirt of those two gay cowboys in the window of the shop, and then the police would come in and say you have to remove that. But they were getting publicity from doing things like that.
So very quickly they took over the whole shop, didn't they? And then it got renamed how many times?
Oh yeah, I find that that's almost like her collections, Yeah, every year she'd bring out a collection.
World's End, Let It Rock, Too Fast to Live, Too Young to Die is another slogan for you. Sex, it was called later. Yeah, they just kept...
Seditionaries.
And then they also brought in the fetish world. So that was blowing my mind reading that book, because I didn't kind of realise that. Literally the sort of the looks of the fetish world with all the buckles and belts and straps and this and that. She took from that world and put it onto clothes. I was really into punk. I was a kid, but I wanted to be a punk.
The fashion of it.
Yeah, I wanted my hair. I wanted to be a punk with purple hair. I used to say that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. I thought they looked amazing, and I wanted to join them. And badges on everything. Oh my god, ripped everything, buckles, belts. To actually think that to find the source of it was the fetish that,
And also, I didn't realise that Vivienne Westwood, I don't know if she was the first person, but she was one of the first people to distress clothes, like to put rips in jeans and T-shirts. I had no idea about
that. Open. I've always loved all that stuff, and I didn't know why.
Right.
This woman and Malcolm, they were actually...
You found it difficult to say Malcolm there. Is that because you begrudge him?
I don't want to give him so much credit.
Yeah, no, I feel the same.
He was doing all the talk, and she was doing the actual making it visual. And she gives him too much credit.
She does, but I kind of think it's that whole thing, right? He was a real shit, as we will find out in a bit. But there's also that thing, the partnership worked. The partnership happened. She was an undeniable creative genius.
Yeah, but the one probably wouldn't have happened without the other.
Without the instigator, with the provocateur, which pushing Malcolm. And he is unlikable, and I don't like it. I found it really hard reading about him in this book, because I did like him, and his music in the 80s I thought was great. I was a fan of Malcolm McLaren, and now I kind of know what kind of a person he was. It really puts me off him. But no, well, maybe it would have happened without him in another way, but certainly the way it did happen, instigating punk and stuff, that was as much Malcolm McLaren as Vivienne Westwood.
It was.
But he pushed too far into... Here's the thing, Vivienne Westwood even now is happy to share that history with him. He wanted it all to be him.
Yes.
He wanted to be the genius, and she was the seamstress. Yes. Right?
That is annoying. But you can't have the clothes without the ideas behind it. It's like art. It literally is art, actually, and the ideas behind it are just as valuable as the product.
Yeah.
Anyway, they were amazing between them. I like it that they said they were kind of designers in search of a band. It's really nuts, because usually the music comes first and then it gets clothed or it gets backdropped, but in this case the art was there, and they needed to find the music to go with it.
What's interesting about that, because obviously we're of an age where kind of punk kind of happened when we were children, right? So we weren't so privy about everything that was happening. So I was interesting to find out that punk was actually the first, and Vivienne and Malcolm were essentially the first people who were marrying fashion with music, in the fact that a band would be dressed by a particular designer, which is so commonplace now.
Yeah, that's true.
But back in the day, obviously stars would wear designer clothes and stuff, but it wasn't like the name of the designer was as important as the name of the band. That came from Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren.
Yeah.
I guess they knew to be seen, they needed to get pop stars and bands to wear their clothes.
Yeah. I'm actually now thinking, though, that Lansky's clothed Elvis, but that wasn't as famous. And then,
but when was he clothing
the bloke
Elvis?
Nudie did all those nudie suits with all the diamonds for the country music stuff. It was around the same time. It was happening.
Okay.
Just throwing that in there. I was just having a think about that. But that's the first that happened in Britain anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I think.
Well, like you say, like Malcolm McLaren is somebody who would take stuff from like the political movements. So perhaps he did see the guy dressing the country and Western people are dressing Elvis, and then thinking, I'm going to take that and bring that over.
That look was linked to that, and that was linked to that.
Yeah.
But it might just be an organic thing that happens because the pop world was being born. I mean, right up to the 50s, it was just big bands and classical music. So the whole, there's a massive revolution post-war of popular culture and the teenage boom, and, so maybe it was evolving all over the world at the same time. Music was becoming something that young people made, and that was getting records made, and that and then you're getting photos taken, and you're going on TV, which was new. And so you needed to be clothed. And so it's maybe just all naturally evolving at that time all over the world.
Yeah.
Imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to imagine it. I think it was.
No, it really was, wasn't it? Which is very exciting time to be alive. But what they did was so far outside mainstream that it's kind of crazy that it became mainstream. It became mainstream because it was so out there and it made the news. Right, let's talk about how the Sex Pistols come into it.
Okay.
Yes.
So they have the shop on King's Road. Now here's the thing, because they're part of pop culture history as we know it, we forget actually that at the time, few people were actually dressing like Vivienne Westwood, to the point where they're in the really cool area of London, King's Road in Chelsea, and there are other people who have boutiques and really cool shops, and they are looking at Vivienne and thinking, wow, who is that? She looks amazing. So even within her world, people are recognising that she is.
Oh, she cut her hair to a pixie thing and bleached it blonde, and they actually reckon that David Bowie copied her.
Yeah, because his hair came out like a year later.
Her, yeah. Because he would have seen her, because everyone went to that shop, didn't they?
Oh, Chrissy Hynde worked there. Jordan, not
Pop,
Katie Price,
Blondie,
Jordan, it was a place to go. Jerry Hall, and people were going in. Everybody who was anybody.
Alice Cooper
went and visited that shop. Before we all knew who they were, they were getting a really good reputation in like the showbiz circles, but the alternative
and the clubbing scene and the music scene, and so they needed a band. Right, Malcolm McLaren was like, I'm going to put a band together wearing these clothes. He just wanted a band that married that whole art that they were creating, the attitude, everything. And some of these characters were coming in. Sid Vicious had ripped all his clothes, but apparently that's because he couldn't find his heroin. And he thought it was in some pocket, and I think he must have been wearing his clothes because he's off his head, and he ripped all his clothes looking for his heroin on his person, and that's where the ripped thing started.
And the safety pins as well.
Then he safety pinned it all back together, which is kind of horrible. That's heroin chic, isn't it? That's the beginning of that.
Yeah, for sure. It is kind of really dark to think that the safety pins came from heroin.
Someone who's absolutely... And Sid Vicious, that's another whole story, which is for another time, because his mum was a heroin addict and had given him heroin at 14. It's actually a very sad whole state of affairs, but him and John Lydon had come into the shop. Johnny Rotten, and they both looked amazing and different, and they'd said, do you want to form a band? Were they even musicians?
No, it was Johnny Rotten to begin with. Sid Vicious came in later. They were both called John, by the way. Their real names were both John. What Malcolm wanted, he had the idea of a punk band, so he wanted to fly in the face of convention. It didn't matter that they couldn't play their instruments or sing. And I think they said to Johnny Rotten, can you sing? And he's like, what for? And it's kind of, well,
you've got the job.
But I think Vivienne said to Malcolm, John should be the singer, but she meant Sid Vicious, and so he got the wrong John. As it turned out beautifully, because Johnny Rotten was a great frontman. But that came from those kids, because they were kids hanging out in the shop. I actually didn't realise how... I knew, obviously, Vivienne Westwood was around at the time of the Sex Pistols and was doing the clothes and stuff. I didn't realise she was, writing the lyrics of some of the songs on that album.
Nor did I. She co-wrote or wrote...
Anarchy in the UK. That title was her idea. Yeah.
Amazing.
Do you know why we don't know that? This has just come to me in this moment, because fucking Malcolm McLaren took all the credit for everything.
He did. Yeah, it's not right.
Let's just airbrush him out completely and say Vivienne Westwood founded the Sex Pistols.
Yes, and did everything.
Yeah.
By the way, it wasn't even called punk, of course. It's somebody, they think they'd done some gigs and somebody, a journalist had written, this bunch of punks. And that sort of became, because of course you can't have a movement name before you've started it. So you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, it would be too contrived.
Yeah.
Because punk isn't contrived at all.
No. But I mean, they were genuine. They really meant everything they said. They meant it. At the time, they absolutely lived it.
No, it always surprises me how early punk started, because I think of it as like late 70s, but actually it was blowing up like 74.
Very early.
And actually, let's not forget the New York Dolls.
No, let's not forget them.
They
started without them. They were already on the scene.
Yes.
Without any help from Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren.
No, for sure. But then Vivienne and Malcolm went to New York, right? And they took suitcases of their clothes because they heard that once a year, there was this thing where designers would go and take over hotels and open the rooms. And they were in a hotel, can't remember what it was, and nothing was happening. They weren't selling any clothes, and they bumped into the New York Dolls. And
they already visited them in London.
That's right.
Their shop, so they knew each other.
And they bumped into him, and they said, "No, you need to be in the Chelsea Hotel," of course. And so they moved to the Chelsea Hotel, and
it all took off for them, didn't it?
It took off, and the owner loved them, so they stayed for longer.
And they ended up, they ended up in and out of CBGBs and mixing with everybody.
Andy Warhol in the factory and stuff. So it did. It really happened. But then Malcolm became obsessed with managing the New York Dolls, who were already a thing.
New York Dolls, incidentally, were a kind of punkish music, but they were grown men with long hair who completely dressed as women.
Sorry, I'm just talking about them and not mentioning who they are, because we've just done Morrissey.
Oh yeah, and there's a lot of crossover.
Listen to the Morrissey podcast, because the New York Dolls are very important.
Yeah, very linked to.
Yeah. Then here they are again. I tell you, everybody is linked.
It is amazing,
books.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So Vivienne goes back to London because obviously she has children.
Yes.
She's using a lot of babysitting goodwill from her parents. But Malcolm stays over there because he's determined to manage the New York Dolls.
Doesn't he?
Yeah, but then he goes back and forth to America a lot. Then he comes back and he wants to do the Sex Pistols, right? Is that the right order that happens? So. And then so the Sex Pistols are created from kids that were hanging out in and visiting the shop.
And then Vivienne Westwood is decking out the New York Dolls in red leather outfits, and
wow,
they looked amazing.
She really, it's amazing that you can know her and she's just such a world-conquering icon, but then you delve into her past and you think, oh my gosh, she was dressing the New York Dolls. It didn't even occur to me that she...
Can I go on a massive tangent?
Yeah.
Because it totally blew my mind that she designed the Virgin Atlantic uniforms, which I must have somehow missed that in the news. And then I've since seen some Virgin Atlantic stewardesses. Amazing. If I hadn't read this book, I wouldn't understand what what it means that she designed those uniforms, because of the way the jackets they actually have some of that bodice effect.
Oh, do they?
The way the jackets fold and the bits around the hips and stuff, you can actually see Vivienne Westwood's style in them, and I would never have clocked that.
I get the impression that she wouldn't have done that for any airline. It's just that she really likes Richard Branson. They came up together, and I think eventually he re-signed the Sex Pistols after they were dropped from EMI. But they were a similar age. They came up together at the same time. But she likes what he does.
Yeah,
philanthropically.
That's true. Mind you, the Vatican got Versace to redesign all of their uniforms.
Did they?
I think it was Versace. Yeah. I mean, so sometimes they get random jobs, don't they?
Yeah, but you have to approve of the Catholic Church to dress the Vatican, don't you?
Yes. Anyway, we've just... I've leapt from punk to Virgin Atlantic uniforms. Let's leap back again. Back to the New York Dolls.
So punk is happening.
Yeah, it's happening. She says everyone's going nuts at these gigs. They're pogoing, just jumping on the spot, basically, and it's kind of all nuts. Eventually she tires of this. Yeah,
but I thought that was really interesting, and that shows the person Vivienne is. They were kind of they were inspiring a political movement amongst young people, like saying don't trust the government and stuff, and they created this whole movement that was incredibly popular. And she said, you know what, we brought it to them and all they wanted to do was jump up and down.
Yeah, exactly. I've written this quote down. when I turned around on the barricades, there was no one there. They were just still pogoing, so I lost interest.
Yeah.
Because she was like fighting for the freedom of the human spirit, and they're just jumping up and down, drunk, having a laugh.
Yeah, that was what punk was about.
That took it to the end for her.
It is interesting, just as a concept, that you can be political and you can try and reach people through music and fashion, but ultimately half the people are two-dimensional and they just want the music and the fashion. And they don't care about the political movement.
It's have fun. So she moved on, and she actually realised that she needed to go it alone, but it took her a while to rid.
What's interesting is that she kind of, certainly in terms of being a parent, always went it alone. When she was earning the only wage, when they come back and they were in that flat and the kids were young, one was a baby, one was a child, and she was being a school teacher, she would get in trouble at work for being late because she had to get up, feed the baby, take him to the nursery, come back, pick up the other kid, take him to school, and Malcolm would still be in bed. And he refused to help her out, and she said that she couldn't trust him because he said, if you leave one of these kids with me, I'm going to take them to Bernardo's, which, if you're listening in America, is a children's home. But also she said she knew he wasn't joking. She knew that if she did leave one of the boys with him, he would have taken them to Bernardo's. I mean, what is wrong with that man?
But this is also how liberal she was. When they were about 9 and 11.
Oh my God, I know what you're going to say. I love this.
It is kind of amazing. She sent them in summer holidays for 2 weeks on their bikes from London all the way down to Devon and back on their bikes.
They cycled themselves at 9 and 11,
with camping equipment.
Yes.
And just camped along the roads. And then they interviewed the boys, and they absolutely had the time of their lives.
They did.
I think her parents were down in Devon, so they eventually got there and then back.
Yeah, no, she said that even the grandparents got into the spirit of it. So these boys have been riding their bikes for, go 5 days, camping on the way from London to Devon. And she said that when, in defence, she says it was a different time. And she said, but my parents were up for it. She said when the boys were cycling towards the house, they'd made a checkered flag and they were waving it. The boys say, the men say now, recalling that experience, they said, obviously, it took us a while the first time, but the next time we did it in half the time. So you did it more than once.
And then when the next year, they went to France.
Yeah, but they were still children, right?
They were 10 and 12.
And they went to France on their own.
On their own. It's amazing. God. But they loved it.
Do you know what? When I heard that the first time, I thought that can't be true. And then when I read it in the autobiography, I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, of course they loved it.
Yeah, of course they loved it. It's brilliant. Right, moving on. They stayed poor for so long. And one of the reasons is they installed some bloody twat, their mate, so-called friend, for something like 8 years. He was actually stealing from them.
In the
shop. And they couldn't work out why she was working day and night, knocking out all these clothes, and they were never making any profit. And she'd go, I haven't taken any money today. Oh no, how am I going to pay the children's school fees? So he always lent her money, and he was lending her own money, and he had a really bad coke problem. And that's where all their profits went for 8 years.
8 years.
See, she's a classic, example of a creative person who just cannot do business.
But
her brain won't do business.
But she trusts other people to do it.
Combination of those things.
Yeah. No, I kind of get how that would mean that happened for 8 years.
I could imagine that happening to me.
Yeah.
Because you just want to create, you don't want to do the business.
Yeah, no, the business is boring.
But seriously, they were broke. She was broke for a fashion icon and legend. She was broke for such a huge part of her life. One of the most surprising things for me reading this book is even when she was a relative household name in the mid-1980s, so punk had happened, she was a designer, her name was out there. Flat broke.
She had absolutely zero money. Even after she'd been to Italy and came back, she had to sign on the dole. Wow.
Yeah, I guess the press had taken her story and run with it, so we've all heard of her, but none of it was making any money.
Yeah. And what's amazing about that is that obviously money was right down the list in the things she wanted out of life.
Yeah.
She wanted to create.
Yeah.
She wanted to change things. Those were the reasons
that's right.
she did it. And as long as she could just keep her head above the water in terms of rent. Well, she wasn't even paying the rent because the bailiffs were coming round. She was that skint.
Yeah.
But I guess money was under creative fulfillment and the drive to do what she wanted to do. That's amazing. She kept it, which is, again, in terms of success, it is those people who keep going against the odds who eventually break through and make it.
Yeah.
But in many respects, she'd already made it by that point.
She had made it, just not financially.
Yeah.
So anyway, after she realised she moves on from the Sex Pistols, Malcolm's still all caught up in music. Mm-hmm. She starts making actual collections. She thinks, I'm going to see if I can make it in the fashion world. Let's make a collection, which initially Malcolm was involved in. And one of their first collections was the New Romantics. Well, okay, as an 80s kid, the New Romantics, it means everything to me. And I copied Adamant. You know, I wore frilly shirts and pirate trousers and all of that stuff. And I absolutely loved Culture Club and dressed as them and all that. And I had no idea that had anything to do with Vivienne Westwood. I didn't know that. So she seriously affected my clothes taste via those bands of the 80s and New Romantics.
So the first proper collection she did, which was Pirates, that was when Malcolm had the band Bow Wow Wow, and they dressed them in those clothes. Bow Wow Wow, this again shows you what Malcolm is like. Adam Ant approached Malcolm McLaren and said, will you manage us? Malcolm McLaren said, okay. He sacked Adam Ant from the band.
Amazing.
And put in Annabella Lewin as the lead singer.
14 years old, wasn't she?
Yeah, and named them Bow Wow Wow.
Yeah.
But he got a successful...
then
actually, Adam Ant became massive. But that's... so the clothes came from that movement, and then it just spilled out, and it really influenced that whole romantic movement, and Boy George and everything.
That actual collection then filtered into absolute mainstream then.
It's interesting, like, as much as you think you know about Vivienne Westwood... It's so far-reaching. If you scratch anything in the early 80s, her influence is there somewhere. Her involvement, not even her influence, her actual direct involvement. Yeah, amazing.
That's pretty cool. So those were some revelations for me. And basically, she starts to take off. She starts getting into the fashion world and doing collections. And
by doing her collections, and
fashion...
presenting them at Fashion Week and stuff.
And she teams up with Keith Haring.
Yeah, they were going to collaborate.
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows who he is now, don't they?
New York.
He's very famous.
Keith Haring, I would think so. Google him if you don't.
But it's like the coming together of her style and his was very, very cool. Mm-hmm. And I think each thing like that happening to her starts liberating her. And then, because she's always drawn from a really serious intellectual connections, she makes friends with this bloke Gary Ness, and he's an art historian, and he's asked her if he can paint her portrait, and that sparks up an amazing friendship, which they really talk a lot about in this book, because that brought her to connect with the art history, and it's mostly paintings she's looking at, but the history of fashion through paintings. And then she ends up finding old patterns, actual patterns of clothes from those times, so she can copy the patterns and then make it her own. So take corsets, bringing corsets into modern fashion and fabrics, and she's bringing the history of clothes but mixing it with modern times and having complete freedom to do whatever she wants with that history, just messing it up, and also proper cutting styles, and takes fashion onto a whole new level by becoming quite serious, actually.
It's very interesting. It's just so many levels to what she didn't take anything lightly at that point. It was all so heavily researched and finessed and executed.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's like she's had more than one life, because she completely goes in another direction.
But I think an important thing happens at this time. Carlo comes into it at this time, right? So Carlo is an Italian guy. No, she ends up having a relationship with him for about 4 years.
But it's clearly not that important.
And so they have this working relationship, and he's the one who says, do you know what, you should be coming to Italy and making the clothes in Italy. But more importantly, he's the one who said to her, because up until now, everything is still done under the World's End label, which is in conjunction with Malcolm McLaren.
Yeah. Damn cheek.
It was her mum that did that, you know.
Was it?
When they started off and they got the shop, her mum said, you need to do this properly. And she gave her £100 to set up a business, and they put both of their names on it. And Vivienne Westwood said, that's the biggest regret of my life, was starting a company with both our names on it.
Yeah.
So then, for the next however long, even though she'd already broken away and he was going over to music and she was taking care of the fashion and designing, he totally had his name on it all.
Yeah.
Carlo was the person who said to her, now is when you stop doing stuff under the name World's End and you do it under the name Vivienne Westwood.
And I think it cost all the money she had to legally make that right.
Well, then they went to Italy and he took her over and he had all the contacts and there was this other guy. So they were looking for funding at this point. People knew who she was, part of punk. But it's one thing being part of punk and the music industry, it's another for the fashion world.
Couture.
To make that leap.
Yeah.
And you need serious funding and you need
you need to be able to back up your ideas with mass production, otherwise what's the point?
Yeah. So Carlo kind of managed her at this point and he took her to Italy and then he said, okay, is it Armani or the other one? I can't remember. Armani or Versace?
Yeah.
There's a guy in between, I can't even remember what his name is, but there's a guy they went to.
Oh yeah, he was going to take her on, but he died.
Yeah, so he went and he was going to get funding and it's either Armani or Versace, and I can't remember which one it is, but one of them gave £150,000. It doesn't matter, they're both the same. Was going to invest £150,000 in Vivienne Westwood to launch her, and then unfortunately this guy who introduced them died, and then the whole thing was pulled. Apart. So then she was back in London on the bones of her ass, signing on the dole with the bailiffs at the door.
Yeah, she's nuts.
Damn. But she doesn't stop. They opened the shop again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's still cranking out collections, and she's teaching. She was teaching in Vienna and then Berlin.
Yeah, and that's where she met the love of her life. Yeah, she met the proper love of her life. Because he's a nice person. Finally. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Andreas.
Yeah, I'd just say Andreas.
Let's just say Andreas, and he is Austrian. He was 23, a student.
She was 48.
48, which is a big age gap.
It is, but do you know what? They've stayed together for so long, and I look at them and I think it's the most beautiful
it really
relationship.
Is.
And I fully believe that when I say I think all 23-year-old men should at least have one relationship with a 48-year-old woman in their life. Because they would teach you so much.
Yeah. But ideally, it lasts forever, because otherwise the 48-year-old is always going to feel really old when they get dumped. She never got dumped.
No, of course not. Who would dump Vivienne Westwood?
Oh, it's really good, though. He was a massive, massive talent. And she says he could have easily become massive on his own. And she's so lucky that he stuck by her. It's so lovely how she talks about him. Mm-hmm. But he was in awe of her. But basically, they're a team. And talking about not giving Malcolm McLaren credit, he needs to be talked up more. Actually.
I found that amazing, actually, where Malcolm McLaren didn't deserve any credit. Okay, like a tiny bit of credit, but he took all the credit. Yeah. And then Vivienne Westwood said, what people don't realise, because the company is called Vivienne Westwood, is that Andreas actually does half the work.
And at that point, it's a label rather than her, Vivienne Westwood. Yeah. So, you can't suddenly make it Vivienne and Andreas, because that really is the label. Sure. But now when she died, which wasn't so long ago, it was on the news that Andreas said, well, she's left me with a huge amount of work to do and I'm going to carry on. And that's the first I'd heard of him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I really hope that he will carry it on, and I hope he rises up, and in the history of time he'll get the credit he deserves.
He had half of her estate and the other half went to Jeff Banks. Now, interestingly, when she came back from Italy, now also one of her sons, the son who started Agent Provocateur, actually was very hands-on in the business, and he created a lot of stuff, and he actually got the first Japanese licensing deal, which is a big movement in her becoming a massive global brand. Carlo kind of takes the credit for that a bit, but actually Carlo came in at a point when Joe, the son, had actually done a lot of work with his mum. She had to make the awful decision of getting rid of Joe and taking on Carlo. And he was devastated at the time, but look, it worked. He went on and did Agent Provocateur. So, and then at that point, when they didn't get the money from Italy, Jeff Banks actually gave them the money to keep going.
Right.
Which he stole from Sandy Shaw, but that's another podcast. So, I mean, that was a good investment for him. That's
not in this book, is it?
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah. Read it today.
Good Lord. I've completely blanked that bit out.
Well, there's a lot to forget.
There is a lot.
Let's just say at this point, that there's a lot in this book.
Oh, it's a big fat book.
And I'm loving doing this podcast because just let me tell you, I'm falling in love with all of these people. I was in love with Vivienne Westwood anyway, but I loved reading this again. We don't even have a hope of covering everything in this podcast. So we're kind of giving you her rights
if you're interested, read the
book. Yeah. Because also it's not just about Vivienne Westwood. If you're into fashion and pop culture, Vivienne would hate us saying pop culture because I think she's kind of more into high art. I think she thinks pop culture cheapens what she's done, and I kind of get that. So the book is not just about Vivienne Westwood, it's also, there's a lot of historical context, there's a lot about the political climate of right from post-war Britain right up to punk and then beyond to where her brand explodes in like the 80s and the 90s. So we've kind of got to the point, right, where she's a global brand and she's starting the collection, she's met Andreas, so there's a lot of success doing a new collection every year and her growing and
talking
growing.
About Japan, they're mad for her in Japan. I didn't particularly know that.
No, you know when you see those Japanese culture girls like the Harajuku girls and stuff, there's a almost direct Vivienne Westwood influence.
Gwen Stefani.
Yeah, there you go.
That song with Harajuku girls, and she mentions
Vivienne Westwood.
Vivienne Westwood girl.
Yeah,
so
there you go.
It's all connected.
All connected.
I see that. There's a list here. I've written it down because it's amazing of what she contributed to fashion. Right? Shall I read it?
Yeah.
All right. This is it. Cutting. Slogans on t-shirts, collage and DIY in fashion,
right.
Fetish wear as fashion, corsets were reintroduced by her, historical patterns coming back, historical costume, tweed resurrection, platform pedestal shoes, which are completely gaga. Now, it's very fetish, but...
And actually, you know what really pushed Vivienne Westwood onto the front pages around the world?
Naomi Campbell falling over in Impossible to Walk in shoes.
Falling off impossible shoes.
And a bit of tweed. Suddenly everyone was looking. That really did, though. But everyone went mad for made them both really famous.
Yeah, because what's nice about it, you always thought that Naomi Campbell was some kind of haughty ice maiden. And actually, when she falls over, she's just laughing at herself. It's so nice.
Yeah, it's good, that. So it made falling over fashionable. Undergarments as overgarments. The tube skirt, which I didn't realise. A fine knitwear on catwalk. She's obsessed with knitting. Oh,
here's an interesting thing. Before she really took off, she went to American Vogue. Is it Grace Coddington?
Oh, yeah.
Took one of her collections in to try and get into Vogue. And Grace Coddington kind of turned her nose up at it and said, I don't think this is right for Vogue. And Vivienne Westwood was like, she was literally sat there in a mohair jumper, which Vivienne Westwood had designed, like the original, and brought back to the masses. Yeah. Incredible.
No. Ignorant idiot.
Yes.
The woman. Hourglass figure. Asymmetry on catwalk. And, of course, punk. I mean, that's an amazing list of an influence in global fashion.
Yeah, she's a very important lady.
Yeah.
And what I love about her as well is that she didn't really get going until she was about 30. I mean, the groundwork was there.
Very true.
But she was a teacher. She
didn't get any cash till she was about 50 or something.
I know,
she really didn't get paid for it.
She really didn't. And now I was watching a documentary about her. Now she has her global brand and, she has 20 accountants and 50 business managers. Yeah. There's a documentary made in the last 5 or 10 years. And there's a meeting of them and she just goes, they're all sat down, she just goes in and she doesn't sit down. She just says to them, look, I know you're all employed to expand this company and make money. She goes, I don't care about the money. She says it is just all about the fashion and what we can say through the fashion.
Amazing.
And and I get that. And I think there's part of her actually which probably feels a bit uncomfortable about making so much money because
it did. Oh, sorry. Cut you off.
Go on.
Oh, well, it did make her feel uncomfortable, and that's why she got into activism so strongly. And that's how she could turn around making money and actually and the power and fame and use it for good so that she could live with herself at peace. Because the rest of this book, basically, the last whole section is about climate revolution and her whole...
There's one thing, even if this podcast turns out to be an hour long, I'm not going to finish it without talking about her activism, and there's a reason for that. There was another documentary made about 3 years ago that I went to the cinema to see, and Vivienne, when she had planned it with the documentary maker, understood that the documentary was going to be about her activism. And actually what happened was that it was a whole documentary about her fashion work and her punk legacy, and right at the end there was like a 3-minute section of her on a Greenpeace boat. So Vivienne distanced herself from the documentary because she's like, no, if you're not going to talk about my activism, don't talk about me at all. Now I know it's a bit hypocritical that we just spent an hour talking about everything else, but we have to talk about do her legacy justice and do what she wanted by talking about what an amazing selfless activist this woman is. It was always there from the slogans on the t-shirts, you know. And I think you're right, now she's making billions of dollars. It gets to the point where Cool Earth, the eco activists, they go into the Amazon and the Congo, and they're all about deforestation, and that's the one that she wants to herald. And so she gives like £1 million pounds.
I'll tell you what, even if she had never made any money, she'd have given the rest of her life to it. She just would have, because she discovered that this was all happening, and once she's got the information, that's her next intellectual project.
And they even, in the book, they say that even when she was 75, they'd been hiking for a week somewhere like Peru, and then they ended up with the councillors or the government or something, and everybody was absolutely knackered. But some 75-year-old Vivienne Westwood got up, just did a speech off the top of her head, and convinced the government to go forward with Cool Earth policies. So she also then saved like 1 million acres of rainforest when everybody else was ready to go to bed. And also the supporter of Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning, and she'll go to the Met Ball again, like her t-shirts with the logos on. She'll wear a t-shirt with like free Chelsea Manning, and there
she's all the WikiLeaks, it's supporting all that stuff.
And so then when the camera is shoved in her face and they say, who are you wearing tonight, she'll say, I'm wearing free Chelsea Manning. Then she'll turn, the person she went with said that she just turned to her afterwards and said that it was worth coming out for. And if she was asked to do a chat show, she'd go, I don't want to. I will, because I can talk about climate I can't imagine she wants to go on Jonathan Ross to talk about herself, and then she goes on, talks about climate revolution, and then Prince Charles writes her a letter saying, after you were on TV, 30,000 people signed up to the website.
It's amazing. So she's making a difference, which is all she ever started out wanting to do.
All she ever wanted to do. I mean, obviously, she's hugely passionate and driven by fashion, which for most people would be enough in itself, but she always had this thing about changing the world.
And changing attitudes. That was always linked with fashion to her. So she says clothes can give you a better life, and it certainly worked for her.
Yeah, it sure did. Can everybody listening just please go and buy this book, because it is, or just even read a bit about her on the internet, her legacy and stuff. I met her.
Did you?
Yeah, well, no, I didn't actually. I was doing but you know, I used to work looking after people backstage and stuff. So I was doing a Prince Charles and Camilla party at Prince Charles's house, where they had a stage where they had people coming to talk about business and the planet and stuff. And Vivienne Westwood was coming, and I was so excited because it's my job to look after her and show her the green room. Anyway, I get distracted over the other side of the site, and then somebody goes past me on a bicycle, and I thought, oh my god, it's Vivienne Westwood, and I'm not there to meet her. So I'm running behind her on the bicycle. And do you know what she did? She just came on her bicycle, she leant it against the wall, straight up on stage, did this wonderful talk about the planet and what we should all be doing. Round of applause. Got off the stage, back on her bicycle, and off she went.
She didn't need a green room, she didn't want a glass of champagne.
Like the lowest maintenance person that ever was. No carbon footprint from Vivienne Westwood. Right. There was a very split second where she come off stage, and I thought I could say something, and I just thought, no, I'm just going to be gushing. I just stood there in awe, and I watched her get on her bicycle and leave. And I kind of thought, I should have spoken to her.
No,
I thought, no,
you did the right thing.
She is who she says she is.
Yeah. She talks the talk and walks the walk.
And bikes the bike.
Bikes the bike.